Thank you, Rich. I really appreciate all of you joining us and Rich for that wonderful introduction. What an opportunity we have this afternoon, with everything we've been experiencing in 2020 to take some time out and really reflect as people and as people who have joined in many different organizations, for profit and not for profit, around the country and around the world. We appreciate everyone taking time to think a little bit about cross-cultural relevance, cross-cultural competence, cross-cultural intelligence today. So I really do hope that what we present for the next 25 or 30 minutes is relevant to you and your organization. And as Rich said at the end of the presentation, we will have some time for question and answer, and I'll do my best to answer any question you have. So I'm going to jump right in it. So if you have anything, just type out your questions and we'll get to it. So if you can see my screen here, the first thing that we want to look at is requesting control. So, technology is always a wonderful thing, and we have a few hiccups once in a while. I think I have it now. So the first thing you might be able to see here is an iceberg. So many of us who especially have grown up or lived in Florida, we have the opportunity to see icebergs all the time, don't we? When we go manatee watching or whale watching in Hawaii or in Florida or off any of the coasts, or, swim with dolphins, we see icebergs all the time, don't we? Well, we've seen this kind of a thing in cross-cultural training or cross-cultural interactions a lot over the years. So if this is not new for you, I appreciate you bearing with us. It's a good kickoff because generally, when we look and think about being cross-culturally relevant or pertinent, we do think about like, well, what's different? Why do we need to even think about this topic? We know everything about other people. I've read some things. I actually read some Twitter feeds, and I got on TikTok, and I got on Instagram, and I looked on Facebook, and I see people are very different than me. They express themselves differently, look differently, act differently, speak differently. I think in TikTok you can actually hear people speak, can't you? I'm not sure. But when I was a kid, TikTok was like the mouse ran up the clock, and then the clock struck 12 and the mouse came down again. But today, as we look at a CCT, we really want to understand that many of the things that we do see in the media or social media is just above the surface. So we can only see some of the things like it says here, our dress. We can see maybe food people eat, some things like that. But we can't tell people's values, what they stand for, what their beliefs are, whether they are integral and have integrity. And we can't understand their time orientation. Will they meet us on time or will they be late? We really don't know just by looking at a person or the top of the iceberg. With 90%, I think it's 87% of the iceberg is under the water. Just like with us humans, we're very, very complicated, aren't we? So there's a lot of things going on in our minds and our life. So today we're going to unpack a few of those things that hopefully help us to be more culturally intelligent. When we were growing up, we all had an IQ test, and I hope you passed it because it wasn't pass fail. But some of us scored 80 or 90 or 100 or 105, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40. Some of us scored different scores on the intelligence quotient, IQ. Then we came along and we had EQ, didn't we? EQ really tells how we get along with other people. So really, sometimes we don't score real well on EQ. And I think EQ and CQ kind of go together. So cultural quotient is different than EQ, just that we're dealing with people of other backgrounds. And what a relevant topic that we have today. So why is it important? Why do we even talk about it? We can tell that, if you look in a lot of the magazines, it has been named as the top leadership challenge for the next century. A lot of people are trying to figure out, what am I expected to do? Why do I need to think differently? I've grown up and I've been pretty successful at doing things the way I've always done it. I'm not sure why I need to reflect on this. Well, we need to know that effective leadership requires us for the ability to adapt quickly and effectively to the things going on around us. So if we have not adapted quickly and efficiently this year in 2020, we're having a lot of challenges. And also it's essential to interacting in today's global environment. I mean, everything we see is all over the world. We don't just see our local hometown newspaper, the Orlando Sentinel or the Pittsburgh Penguin paper, say that 3 times, or the Indianapolis Star or the Canadian hockey stick paper. I don't know what Canadian papers are, but I should know, shouldn't I? So I will get back to you on that. But there's 4 dimensions of CQ. If we really want to raise our intelligence and know more about other people who come from different backgrounds, different perspectives, different ideas, first we have to say, are we motivated? Do we really care? And we're going to unpack each of these in a minute. Second, what's our knowledge? What cognition do we have going on? What do we know? So we got to be motivated. We have to have some knowledge. We have to have background and information. We have to really think about metacognitively. What has been sort of pre-planned or pre-programmed in for us to think about? How have we been influenced, and then how do we prepare and check ourselves when we're in an engagement with people from all across the world? How do we really enact that, which is the final thing for our behavior to change? Because really, if we increase our cultural intelligence, cultural awareness, cultural quotient, but we don't change our behavior, that's really not very effective. So we really hope that today you go away with some tips, and we're going to be citing some researchers like Hofstede, and I think it's really, really interesting. I'm kind of a shy guy, if you can't tell. So if you have any questions or need to talk to me, just go ahead and well, the slide's not coming up, but first we want to understand diverse customers. You know, there's a lot of things that we really want to know about the customers or the clients or the people that we deal with. There we go. It's just got a little lag here. Second, we want to manage diverse teams, both internally and externally. So there's a lot of things going on when we're really working with people from other cultures and backgrounds. You know, if we're not motivated by knowing our customers and being relevant and contacting them appropriately, if we're not motivated by managing diverse teams both inside of our company and outside, then we should also be motivated by trying to recruit and develop and retain cross-cultural talent, because we all need people around us that challenge us to think a little differently. Also, we need to adapt our leadership style. So the leadership style that we have used and had for the last century or 50 years or 10 years or 5 years, if you're just coming up in the business world, we need to be adapting that. They say, you know, when I was growing up, I actually did some of my work at Indiana University, and in some of my research, it said at the time that a culture changes every 10 to 15 years. And then by the time that I finished my PhD, they said it changes every 5 years. Now they say a culture changes every 3 years. And you and I have seen that as we've been impacted with things that have happened both here in the United States by our leaders, by the people around us, by social media and the media. So we really have to say, are we motivated to be culturally aware and culturally relevant? And then also finally to demonstrate respect. You know, we really do want to reach out to people and reach across the aisle, and we want to demonstrate respect to other people appropriately in their culture, the way they think, feel, act, believe, the things under the surface as we looked at the iceberg. Well, the presentation doesn't move. So the next slide really is misattribution. Really, when we look at misattribution, looks like Rich, you have control there now. So misattribution is really, you know, when we grow up in a certain society in a certain way, doing things a certain, you know, it's called cultural intelligence for us, for our background. But when we come to a new culture, in this picture, hopefully it's a little nice, little cute to help you to understand what you think's right and what you think's relevant may not work in another culture. That just may not be appropriate. The person here is, whoa, what are you doing in my personal space? And we see things and hear things like that all the time. So it's very, very different as we deal with people from different backgrounds and different cultures. So again, knowledge, what do we know? How do we know about things? Let's take a look at this first case study. Just read it for a second. So why would that be a problem? What's going on? Claire believes that everything in her new job is going great. David thinks I've given her feedback. I've told her multiple times about the challenges and the changes she needs to make, but yet she doesn't make them. So what's going on? Well, in some cultures, as we see on this next slide, they give feedback very directly. In some cultures, they give it very indirectly. So and we'll see from the next slide that the culture in the French culture, she really does expect that direct negative feedback is given to her. And in the US, we're about in the middle of giving direct and indirect feedback, but if you are working with people from other cultures, some people actually do expect you to give negative feedback very frankly, very directly, and somewhat positive feedback less frequently. But indirect cultures, they criticize in private. We should all do that. Value of saving face. We've heard that concept before. There's not only saving face, but there's giving face, which is building someone up and making them feel good about who they are and what they've done. So in this example here, we see from this next slide that Clara, coming from a French culture, she really was confused. She didn't understand the feedback. She didn't understand why there was a problem, because David kept, from his cultural perspective, he kept thinking, I'm giving her feedback, but he did it in a circumlocution fashion. He would say, I was thinking about what you're doing and how you approach things, and really what we need you to work on is this and this, and instead of saying, I need you to change. This is the behavior that needs to be developed. I want you to work on. You have 20 days or 15 days to do this and this. So again, the way we interact with people, and this doesn't have to just be in the workplace, it could be in society and organizations that we participate in, but how we interact from people of different cultures, we want to learn about what's right, what's wrong, what's neutral. So, again, to raise our cultural intelligence, raise our cultural awareness, it's very important that we understand the cultures that we're dealing with. So you can see here, that's the cultural feedback from everyone. I'm not sure what's going on with the presentation today, so I apologize. I see Rich's mouse and I see my mouse, so it happens. We've never had any technical glitches before, have we? So we just keep going on. The next cultural dimension, number 2, just take a look at that for a second. I think most of us are used to coming into a meeting and having an agenda, having takeaways, having things that we need to do as a result of the meeting. But really, from a cultural perspective, what we want to think about is low context cultures and high context cultures. If you're in a low context culture, you have direct, explicit messages. This is the way it is. It values rule and task completion, and you're dependent on really what's said. In a high context culture, you'd have implicit messages. So if we look here, rating your own culture, let's take a look at which cultures are low context and which are high context cultures. Again, the low context cultures, look at the US way over to the side of the screen on the low context, high context cultures. They know the background, they know the traditions, they know implicit, indirect feedback. So again, when you're involved in people from other cultures, you really have to understand what's going on. I'm moving a little bit quicker now as we have a lot to cover here. Rich told me this would only be like a 4-hour presentation today, so I hope you guys have enough to. No, I'm just kidding. Don't everybody sign off. I'll be done by 2:30, probably. No, I will be. I'll stop even if I'm not. But look at this. How could somebody who got Employee of the Month really think that's a problem? Is that really real? If you get Employee of the Month, are you really going to have your performance go down? Well, we do see that. We see that in some cultures because people do not want to be singled out. They don't want to throw away their shot. I had to say that from Hamilton. If you guys have been watching Hamilton like me, I can't switch the slides again. So Rich, if you're on there, I don't know what's going on, but really, you have some cultures who are very individualistic. We stress the needs of the individual over the group. And as you can imagine, people who have grown up and been raised in the United States, we're very, very egocentric, very self-centric. Even from the time we're like 5 years old and we go to kindergarten or first grade, and the teacher says, tomorrow we're going to have show and tell. Well, what do they want us to do in show and tell? They want you to bring something and they say, my daddy gave me this, and this is something he uses on his computer, and it usually helps him move the PowerPoint slides unless it's frozen and you're having technical difficulties. But, we actually have to get up in front of other people. We have to stand alone. We have to give our ideas and our opinions. We have to really pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. We have to know the answers. We have to make it on our own. We have to climb the ladder. Those are good traits. And I'm not saying any of this. Whatever I'm saying about different cultures is not right or wrong. It's not good or bad. It's not implied that some cultures are better than others. All we're trying to do is raise awareness that people in different cultures were raised. Our values are embedded in by the people around us to feel and think and believe a certain way. So if you come from an individualistic country and you come to somebody who comes from a collective country, there's a lot of different things can happen. Collective countries, they want harmony in the group. They don't want to be singled out. So in that slide before, you saw people who were made Employee of the Month. They felt really bad. Why are you picking on me? I want to blend into the woodwork. I don't want anyone to single me out. I don't want anything to be focused. No spotlight on me. You can tell that's probably like me too. I don't like spotlights on me, but you have to prepare for these cross-cultural interactions. You have to first even think, do I care that there could be a breakdown? Do I care about other people around me? Do I care what their beliefs, habits might be? Am I going to prepare for these interactions? And am I going to even think like something's going on here? I'm not sure what's going on, but something is different. So again, we can see some cultures here that are individualistic, US, UK, collective countries like Korea, China, Slovenia, Mexico, Turkey. So it makes a big, big difference, guys. And we're just touching the surface today. So we're just building awareness. But there are so many things we could dive into, and we could unpack even on this topic alone. I can talk for, I think my record is maybe 4 hours on 1 or 2 slides. So I won't do that today because we're in a monochronic culture. So people in a monochronic culture, we like to do one task at a time. Don't interrupt me. It's unacceptable. We focus on a deadline and a schedule, especially finance people. Finance people, whoa, do not interrupt them ever. They will bite your head off. They want promptness, organization, deadline, or especially government people, people who work on like government RFPs and things like that, because you do have strict deadlines that you have to adhere to. That's the way they're trained. They're part of a subculture within a culture. It's not good or bad. Again, it's not right or wrong. We just have to understand that we're all different and we had to learn about each other. But if you come from a monochronic culture that values, time, and you value like being on time, and you value getting things turned in on time and having an agenda and having takeaways, and then you meet someone from a polychronic culture, which the task isn't as important as the people around. Projects may flow, interruptions are acceptable, things come and go. I am polychronic. So really, if you want to stay on here 4 hours, I would do it. I'd love that. It would be wonderful because people are important. What we do with people, and we create meaning. We're creating meaning together. I won't do it because I live in the United States of America. We're in LTC headquarters in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I actually was scheduled by my assistant to have a 3 o'clock meeting today. So time is valuable. But what happens when somebody from a monochronic culture works with somebody from a polychronic culture? Well, look, in North America, lateness is excused for 5 minutes. There becomes tension at about 15 minutes. Hostility comes at a half hour. But how about in Latin America? In Latin America, lateness is excused for about a half hour. Tensions start to rise at an hour. Hostility comes at 2 hours. So you see a lot of differences, and these are obviously generalizations for Latin Americans and North Americans. We're all individual people, and we all have developed our own habits, and some of us could work in industries or backgrounds that have overridden our culture, or maybe our families or individual situations are different. But in the main, the concept of lateness or being on time is impacted and influenced by whether you were raised in a polychronic or monochronic culture. I still remember one time that I was speaking in China. So I was asked to give a presentation. I flew to China. I was in Beijing, and they said, okay, Dr. George, you'll have an hour and a half from 9 to 10:30, and you'll do this presentation at 10:30. We will transition and have a break. They go over the whole rundown. I'm like, great, got my PowerPoint, blew it out of the water. I'm a sociolinguist, a lot of background. I can talk on different subjects. Most people say I'm more of the psycho than the sociolinguist, but that happens. So, I got done speaking 9 to 10:30, did all my slides, and they're like, all right, great job. All right, we'll take a short break, and Mr. George will come back and speak to us from 11 to 12:30. And I'm like, what? I've lived in China. I lived in China for 7, 8 years, and I was still confused by that. But it was a polychronic culture. There were other people on the agenda. The agenda was packed from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Everybody with their name and their topic and their slot. It didn't even cross my mind that they would want me to speak. But I'm like, okay, I'm here. I'm not going to refuse. So I'll speak from 11 to 12:30. So I did. I'm like, great. All right. Thank you all very much. I hope you have a great afternoon. It's been wonderful to see you. And then they're like, great. Well, we'll go across the hall for lunch. Please be in your seats. We're only going to have a short break, 12:45. And Dr. George will speak to us again, and he'll be our plenary speaker at lunch. And I'm like, what's going on? I don't even know what's happening now. I'm tired. I've been speaking for a long time. I have no more information. But again, the value was on, making a connection. That was all they did in a polychronic culture is they pushed everything back. And instead of ending at 5 p.m., they ended at 10 p.m. I'm not sure that the other speakers really liked it, to tell you the truth. I'm not sure if everyone in the audience liked it. I'm not sure if all of you like it today. But that's just how cultural works. And raising our cultural intelligence, we have to understand that people have different time orientation. You can see some cultures who have different monochronic. You have Germany and Switzerland way over on the monochronic side. And polychronic, we have Saudi Arabia, India, Nigeria, Kenya. so you can see different cultures with different backgrounds, different perspectives, and we come together and we really do need to raise our awareness of different people right now. So, another thing that we talk about in cultural intelligence is just understanding when we need to speak and when we need to not speak and be quiet. I've really I've studied this a lot, the speech patterns, and the people in Anglo-American conversational patterns, we are very uncomfortable with pauses. If I'm speaking to a group of you and then I'm like going, and then I just don't say anything, you thought you lost audio, didn't you? You thought, what happened? What's going on? Because we can become very uncomfortable. We actually, if speaker A is speaking, speaker B usually cuts off speaker A, and then speaker A cuts off speaker B, and then it goes back and forth. It's like a ping pong style. We're hitting it back and forth, and that's a common style. In East Asian conversation patterns, you have someone speak, the other person actually listens and thinks about what they're going to respond, and there's a pause. It's called a positive pause culture. So again, I've been in many multinational companies who have been, and they say we have Japanese, Chinese, Korean associates who they really don't have anything to say, and we keep going on in the meeting, and then they bring something up from a topic we just had like 5 minutes ago. Why is that? And again, a lot of times it's because they need to think, formulate a response. So we just have different patterns. We have different patterns of communications. And even in the US, we fill in the silence. So what do we need to do to really be culturally aware, culturally sensitive to when we want to raise our cultural IQ? We have to say, what's our plan? We have to plan for our cross-cultural interactions ahead of time. We don't want to get in a situation and then think, now who am I meeting? Who am I speaking with? What backgrounds are in the room? We need to think, what values do they embrace, that could influence the behavior or the presentation, whether it's internally or externally. We want to become an observer, and we look at people in America, they're always on their phone. It doesn't matter if their boss is in the room. It doesn't matter if it's an important presentation. Their heads down, they're focused on their phone. They're not even listening in presentations. And so we have to be an observer of how people interact. I still remember I was taking the governor of the great state of Indiana to China, and we were in a meeting in China, and people's cell phones kept going off, and people would answer their cell phone, and they'd be like, "喂喂，你找谁？我不知道，我不知道你在哪里，我在开会。喂." And it'd be right in the middle of the meeting. Mitch Daniels, who now is the president of Purdue University, he looked at me and he said, "Martin, tell the people to turn off their cell phone. You can't have interruptions during a meeting. This is a multinational, government to government exchange." I'm like, Mitch, we're in China right now. You cannot tell them how to behave in their own country, in their own meetings, in their own culture. So you have to, he's like, "Well, you're supposed to tell me that ahead of time. You're supposed to help me prepare for these interactions." Obviously, I couldn't prepare him for every situation, but now I put it in every one. So if you are in situations with people from China, often during meetings, they go ahead and answer their phone and they talk on their phone, even during a presentation or during a meeting. "Oh, yeah, how are you? That's great. Oh, wow. I got to have something for lunch. What am I going to have for lunch now? I'm not sure, but I'm pretty hungry, so I ought to take some time." Okay, so we got to prepare, or we could find a trusted, knowledgeable cultural guide that could help us to, really understand the interactions. And then after we do that, we have more technical difficulties, and then we start to practice the planning, and then we have action. Like I said at the beginning of the presentation, and I'll end with this, we have to be able to change how we act. Not only how we think, are we motivated to think differently and to know more and to metacognitively plan and get prepared for interactions with people all across in all swaths of life, but then we have to adapt. We have to take time to be a little bit different than we have been in other situations. So we got to take action. And how should I adapt? Knowing when to flex, when not to flex our words, knowing how to draw on what we've already known, how to make requests, how to give feedback, how to apologize, how to adopt our nonverbal communication, how to understand time, and don't just flex our words, but also our attitudes and our actions. We got to prepare for these every day, and we got to prepare to be a part of the global society that we're all a part of now. So thank you very much. I appreciate you putting up with some of the technical difficulties we've had today. We'll continue to work these out. We anticipate having another session, and I'll take any questions that you might have by the end here. But if you want to scan the QR code to vote on the next virtual topic, go ahead and do that, and I'll turn it over to Rich.
Great. Thank you very much, Martin. Appreciate that. So, yeah, like Martin said, we've got a QR code here. This is just a little poll we're doing. If you wouldn't mind just taking out your phone. Also, Madison is going to provide the link, which she just did. Thank you, Madison. In the Q&A, if you click on that link or scan the QR code, that'll bring you to a page which will let you vote on what our next topic would be. So what would you like our next topic would be? We appreciate you voting on that. So while Martin takes a drink, we'll get the questions and answers going. If you have any questions, please submit them now. I do have some questions from attendees that weren't able to make it, but I thought it'd be good to answer them for everybody to hear. So go ahead and post your questions. Like I said, they are private until we publish them, and you can remain anonymous as well if you'd like to. So let's see, we don't have any questions yet, so let me jump to the ones we received through email, okay? So thanks again, Martin here. Let me put Martin back to front and center. I'm sure everybody would love to see him. All right, there you go, the one and only. All right, Martin, so the first question is, how many people can be in a session? And maybe you could answer this one as well. And how long are the CCT classes? So maybe you could make that a twofold. How many people can be in a session, and then how long are the cross-cultural training classes?
Thanks, Rich. Well, typically we do a cross-cultural needs analysis before we do a presentation for every group or organization. So I would say, on an average, we see a cross-cultural training going between an hour and a half or two, but we've had 2 full days, 16 hours of cross-cultural training. We actually have devised different sessions that would accommodate a 16-hour training, but typically it's an hour and a half or 2 hours, and maybe conferences or communities do it once, twice, 3 times. So they might have speak at one and then do another. So yeah, that'd be about an hour and a half or 2. And then you would probably, again, if it's a live presentation, you don't want to have more than 40 people, 50 people in a group. But now that we're doing most things virtually, I would say, the sky's the limit. Bring on 200, 300, that's fine.
Great. Hopefully that answers their question. Another question here is, does LTC offer any other services besides just cross-cultural training?
Yeah, we're a full service language company that was started in 1993. So we'll just be finishing our 27th year in August, starting into our 28th year. We offer, interpreting face to face as well. In this global pandemic, we have phone, we have video, virtual interpreting, so we have a lot of modes of interpreting that we can provide. We do written translation. We obviously do this cross-cultural training, and we do language training. And language training, not like, maybe high school or college language training, but geared to usually businesses and organizations that have behavioral objectives that they want to reach for them and their organization and the employees who work there.
Great. So, feel free to, like I said, ask any additional questions you'd like. Just post them in the Q&A there, even if they are regarding translation or interpretation or language training, any other services. There's another question here we just received. It says, we see a lot of Chinese companies requesting our services. Any tips for building stronger relationships with them specifically?
Yeah, China is a communal company and a country, so a lot of people have a lot, and they have 5,000 years of history. So really, you do want to be appropriate with the Chinese people. Just show them deference. They're very hierarchical, so call them by their titles, and you're not going to necessarily shake hands with them. You're not necessarily going to look them in the eye. You're not necessarily going to call them out. You want to give them face and really build up their guanxi and rapport with them. So you want to do a lot of background to get to know Chinese people, what they do, their company, even the city they've come from, what's valuable to them. And you really want to make sure that that's very important even before you dive into business. A lot of people in Western society is we just do business the way we do it in the United States, but in Asian society, especially in China, they really want us to get to know them and get to know what makes them tick and get to know their backgrounds before just getting to the punch. We want to close everything up. We have our timelines. We're polychronic, and so we want at this meeting fly in, meet with them, tour the factory, give a proposal, and sign a deal. It's not how it works really in China. So get to know them, take time, be very personal, and have dinner, have lunch with them, take them around, show them that you care, show them respect, show them deference. You got to show deference. So there's a lot of things really, and we do a lot with Chinese cultural training.
Great, thank you. This one is related to Burmese cross-cultural training. So the question is, if they did request a Burmese cross-cultural training, would there be a Burmese presenter? And I guess that applies probably for all cultures.
Yeah, when we do specific cultures, and we've done many cultures that we've spotlighted or highlighted, we usually do the general overview that I just presented. And again, that could take 30 to 60 minutes. And yes, we always have someone from the target culture alongside because, obviously they know a lot more because they're from that society. So a professional presenter, we just did one for Sheraton Vistana, and they wanted to understand more about Haiti as they had a lot of associates from Haiti. And so we had somebody from Haiti as a presenter in that with one of our presenters from Orlando, Lauren Cameron from our office in Orlando, Florida. So yeah, we would absolutely have someone else.
Okay, great. So we did have another question come in. Are there any tips on holding Zoom meetings across cultures?
Yeah, actually there are. So in the United States, we speak 6 to 8 syllables per second. And when you have electronic communication, again, you got to think about the background and what the people are getting up to speed on. So you want to understand the other culture. Do they understand the topic? Have they had time to prepare? Are we speaking at, we don't want to go like 3 to 5 syllables per second, but we do want to make sure that we're not using lots of idioms. We are speaking directly. We're checking for understanding. We're validating other people. We're giving them a chance to speak. And in this kind of a situation, you do have to take more pauses, don't you? And you have to give someone else a chance to speak. So in Zoom presentations or in this medium we're having now, you want to have a lot more pauses built into your communication to be effective across cultures.
Great, thank you. I think we've got one more. I think you may have answered it, but maybe you could unpack a little bit more. How do I get started with my cultural competence training? I know you talked about the needs analysis, but maybe dive into that a little bit more, please.
Well, there's a lot of resources. So we call it comprehensible input at LTC. So, anything we can do to read or improve our understanding by, watching videos and being involved in global communities, participating in activities. And if you want to have formalized, we would call these formalized training. We do not want to assume before we jump into a training. So we want to unpack, what are some of the things that are going on in the organization or business that that we can come alongside and shed some light on, help people to think about. Our cross-cultural trainings are a lot like team building, because we're getting people to think and work with people in their own organizations who may or may not have ever thought about these kind of underpinnings. So, it's really, really important that somebody would work with whoever's discussing that with them, member of the LTC staff. So, and we would get to the bottom of what's important.
Great, thank you very much. That looks like that's all the questions. So if nobody else has any more, we appreciate everybody joining this. Thank you, Martin, for all the expertise information there. Let's move on to the next slide, which will give everybody an opportunity to reach out to us. And that would be through, you can call us over the phone, you can email us, our website, you can follow us on social media, and we'd be happy to answer any of the questions you have. Thank you for joining us, everybody.